Imagine for a moment that the most powerful tool you have for changing your life is not outside of you, but inside your own mind. Science tells us something remarkable. Your brain is not fixed, it's flexible. It rewires itself based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. Every experience, every thought, every interpretation you make strengthens certain pathways and weakens others. This means that the way you choose to see the world quite literally shapes the way your brain functions. The truth is, you are never stuck with the brain you were born with. You are always building the brain you will use tomorrow. Now here's the hack, the one brain trick backed by solid science that has the power to change your life. It's called reframing. Reframing is simply the act of choosing a different interpretation of your situation. It doesn't mean ignoring reality, and it's not about sugarcoating problems. It's about shifting the lens through which you view your challenges. Instead of calling something a failure, you call it feedback. Instead of labeling a stressful moment as weakness, you call it preparation. Instead of seeing rejection as the end of the road, you call it redirection. When you change the meaning you attach to an event, you change your brain's reaction to it. This is not just motivational talk. This is science. One of the most powerful demonstrations of this comes from Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset. She discovered that people who believe their abilities can be developed through effort and learning are more motivated, more resilient, and achieve more than those who believe abilities are fixed. The only difference between the two groups was how they chose to interpret struggle. One group saw it as proof they weren't good enough. The other saw it as evidence that growth was happening. The interpretation, the reframe, made all the difference in how their brains engaged with the challenge. Think also about stress, something we often see as a threat. A study from Harvard University revealed that when participants were told to reframe their stress responses, those racing heartbeats and sweaty palms, as signs their bodies were preparing them to perform, their performance improved. Their blood vessels even stayed more relaxed, closer to the pattern of joy rather than fear. Same physiological reaction, completely different outcome, all because of how they chose to interpret it. In other words, your body follows the story your brain tells. That's the incredible power of language. The words you use to describe your experience don't just express reality, they shape it. Tell yourself, I can't handle this, and your brain wires itself toward helplessness. Tell yourself, this is tough, but I'm learning, and your brain wires itself for persistence. Over time, those small choices of language become your brain's default mode. You become someone who either sees opportunity everywhere or someone who feels blocked at every turn. And the amazing part is, you get to decide which one. So how does this brain hack change your life in practical terms? It begins with a simple practice. The next time you face a setback, pause. Don't let your brain run on autopilot. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? Is this really failure, or is it feedback showing me what doesn't work? Is this stress destroying me, or is it my body gearing up to perform? Is this rejection a closed door, or is it redirecting me to a better path I couldn't see yet? With practice, reframing becomes second nature. You begin to catch those negative, limiting frames and replace them with empowering ones. Over time, this does something extraordinary. It changes your habits because you act differently when you see things differently. It changes your resilience because you bounce back faster when setbacks feel like stepping stones. It changes your relationships because you stop interpreting disagreements as personal attacks and start seeing them as opportunities to understand. Most importantly, it changes your future because the brain you are building today through reframing is the brain you will live with tomorrow. The truth is, life will never stop throwing challenges your way. You cannot control every event, every twist, every outcome, but you can always control the frame you put around it. That choice, backed by science and proven by research, is the difference between a life where you are at the mercy of your circumstances and a life where you are the author of your own story. So here's my challenge to you. Starting today, practice this hack. Train your brain to pause, reframe, and choose the meaning that fuels you rather than drains you. At first, it will feel small, but day after day, those small choices will accumulate. And one day, you will look back and realize that this one brain hack didn't just help you through a stressful moment or a difficult failure. It changed the way you see everything. It changed your brain. And in changing your brain, it changed your life. Imagine being told that one simple shift in the way you use your mind could change not just the way you feel today, but the way your brain works for the rest of your life. It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? Yet science has proven that your brain is not a rigid machine set in stone from birth. It is flexible, adaptable, and constantly rewiring itself based on the thoughts you repeat and the meanings you attach to your experiences. Every time you interpret a situation, your brain strengthens certain connections and weakens others. This means you are never stuck with the brain you have right now. You are always shaping the brain you will live with tomorrow, and the choice of how to shape it is entirely in your hands. The key to unlocking this potential is something remarkably simple yet incredibly powerful. It's called reframing. Reframing is the practice of choosing a different perspective, a different story about what is happening. It doesn't mean denying reality or pretending everything is perfect. Instead, it means shifting the lens through which you see your circumstances. Where one person sees failure, another sees feedback. Where one person feels crushed by stress, another sees their body gearing up for action. Where one person interprets rejection as the end, another sees redirection towards something better. The moment you reframe, you change not just your thoughts, but also your emotional and physical response. This isn't positive thinking in the shallow sense, it's neuroscience in action. One of the most convincing bodies of research on this comes from psychologist Carol Dweck, who studied the difference between people with a fixed mindset and those with a growth mindset. Those with a fixed mindset believe their abilities are permanent, carved into stone, and when they fail, they see it as proof of their limitations. Those with a growth mindset, however, believe that abilities can be developed through effort and learning. To them, failure isn't proof of inadequacy, it's evidence of progress. Their brains literally respond differently to challenges, showing more activity in areas linked to learning. The key difference is not talent or intelligence, but interpretation. And interpretation is a choice. Consider stress, something we usually label as harmful. Research at Harvard revealed that when people were told to reframe their stress, seeing racing heartbeats, quickened breath, and sweaty palms as signs of readiness rather than danger, their performance improved dramatically. Even their cardiovascular system responded differently, keeping blood vessels more open and relaxed, similar to the pattern of joy rather than fear. The stress didn't disappear, the situation didn't change, but by reframing their interpretation of stress, their body's entire response shifted in a healthier direction. The story their mind told shaped the way their body performed. This points to something we often underestimate: the power of language. The words you use, both out loud and in your inner dialogue, don't just describe what you see, they create the framework in which you live. If you repeatedly tell yourself, "I can't handle this," your brain wires itself toward helplessness, and that becomes your default. But if you tell yourself, "This is tough, but I am learning," your brain begins wiring itself for resilience and persistence. Over time, those seemingly small choices in language form the foundation of your mindset. You become someone who either feels blocked by obstacles or fueled by them. The good news is that you always have the power to choose which story you tell. So how does this actually change your life? It starts with building a daily habit of awareness. The next time you encounter a challenge, don't let your automatic reaction dictate your reality. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what else could this mean? When you make a mistake, rather than sinking into frustration, ask, what did I just learn that I didn't know before? When you feel nervous before an opportunity, remind yourself, this isn't weakness, this is energy. This is my body preparing me to rise to the occasion. When someone rejects you, instead of assuming the door is closed forever, tell yourself, this is redirection. Life is pointing me to a path I couldn't see before. These small reframes, repeated over and over, begin to reshape not only your thoughts, but the very wiring of your brain. With time, reframing becomes more than just a tool for isolated moments. It becomes your natural way of thinking. It changes the way you act, because your actions are guided by how you interpret events. It changes your resilience because you stop seeing setbacks as permanent walls and start seeing them as temporary detours. It changes your relationships because you stop assuming the worst in others and start looking for opportunities to understand. Most importantly, it changes your future because the person you are tomorrow is built by the thoughts you practice today. Life will always bring challenges, stress, setbacks, and disappointments. None of us are immune to difficulty. But what separates those who are crushed by life from those who rise stronger is not luck, not intelligence, not even resources. It is the story they choose to tell themselves in the face of those challenges. You may not be able to control every event that happens to you, but you can always control the frame you put around it. And that choice, backed by science and proven by research, is one of the most powerful decisions you will ever make. So I leave you with this challenge. From this moment forward, practice reframing. Catch yourself in those moments when negativity tries to take over and choose instead the perspective that empowers you. It may feel small at first, but every time you do it, you are literally reshaping your brain. And one day, you'll realize that this single brain hack didn't just help you through stressful moments or temporary failures. It fundamentally changed the way you experience life. It changed your brain, and in doing so, it changed your destiny. There is one idea backed by science that has the power to transform the way you live, work, and face every challenge. It isn't complicated. It isn't something reserved for the gifted or the lucky. It is a simple shift in the way you use your brain, and once you understand it, you'll realize you've carried this tool with you all along. The discovery is that the brain is not fixed, but flexible, adaptable, and endlessly rewiring itself. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. Every time you think a thought or interpret an event in a certain way, you reinforce the neural connections that support that interpretation. Over time, those repeated choices create habits of thought that shape your emotions, your actions, and eventually your entire life. The question is not whether your brain will rewire itself. The question is, will you let it wire itself by accident, or will you take control and wire it with intention? The way to take control is through reframing. Reframing is the ability to take the same event, the same set of facts, and choose to see them through a new lens. Imagine two people facing the same setback. One calls it failure and walks away discouraged. The other calls it feedback and walks away wiser. Nothing in the external world changed, but the internal story changed everything. That is the power of reframing. When you shift the meaning you attach to what happens to you, you shift the way your brain and body respond. What looks like an ending can become a beginning. What feels like a threat can become an opportunity. What seems like rejection can transform into redirection. This is not just a clever trick of language. It is grounded in decades of research. Carol Dweck's famous studies on mindset revealed that people who believe their intelligence and abilities are fixed struggle more, give up faster, and avoid challenges, while those who believe they can grow through effort are more resilient, more motivated, and achieve more. Their success was not determined by their initial level of talent, but by the way they interpreted struggle. Those with a growth mindset reframed difficulty as part of the learning process, not as proof of inadequacy. This simple shift in perspective created measurable differences in their outcomes. The science is clear. The way you frame your experiences literally rewires your brain to either shut down or keep growing. Another powerful example comes from the way we handle stress. For years, we have been told that stress is the enemy, that it damages health and performance. But Harvard researchers found something surprising when participants were told to reframe their stress response not as danger, but as their body's way of preparing for a challenge. Their performance improved. Their bodies even reacted differently. Blood vessels stayed more relaxed, more open, resembling the patterns seen when people experience excitement rather than fear. Stress itself wasn't what harmed them. It was the story they told about stress that made the difference. By reframing their interpretation, they turned stress into fuel rather than poison. This is why the language you use with yourself is so important. Words are not neutral. They are instructions your brain follows. If you tell yourself, "I can't handle this," your brain begins shutting down possibilities. If you tell yourself, "I'm learning how to handle this," your brain starts looking for solutions. If you repeat, "I failed, I'm not good enough," your brain associates setbacks with finality. But if you say, "That didn't work, now I know what to try differently," your brain stays engaged in problem solving. Over time, those repeated choices of language create deep pathways that shape your automatic reactions. Eventually, you will not even need to remind yourself to reframe. Your brain will do it naturally. So how can this change your life starting today? It begins with awareness. The next time you face a challenge, take a breath before reacting. Notice the story you are about to tell yourself. Then ask, what else could this mean? Maybe that tough feedback at work isn't an attack, but a gift showing you where to improve. Maybe the anxiety before a big presentation isn't weakness, but energy preparing you to rise to the occasion. Maybe the closed door you're facing isn't the end, but the start of a new path you couldn't see before. The facts of the situation remain the same, but your frame changes everything about how you feel and how you respond. With consistent practice, this brain hack transforms more than isolated moments. It becomes the foundation of a new mindset. You will begin to act differently because your actions always follow your interpretation. You will bounce back faster from setbacks because they no longer feel like proof that you're stuck. You will improve your relationships because you stop interpreting every disagreement as a personal attack and begin to see them as opportunities to understand. And most importantly, you will change your future because the brain you're building today with reframing is the brain that will carry you forward tomorrow. Life will never stop offering challenges. It will never stop testing your patience, your courage, and your persistence. You cannot control every event that happens to you, but you can always control the meaning you assign to it. That choice, moment after moment, is what separates those who rise stronger from those who are crushed. It is not luck. It is not talent. It is the decision to choose the frame that empowers you rather than the one that drains you. So I challenge you to start now. Catch yourself in those moments of doubt, fear, or disappointment and reframe them. Choose the story that helps you move forward. At first, it may feel unnatural, but each time you do it, you are literally reshaping the wiring of your brain. One day you will look back and realize that this simple brain hack didn't just help you survive challenges. It completely changed the way you live. It rewired your brain. And in doing so, it rewrote your destiny. There is a simple yet profound truth about the human brain that can transform the way you approach life. For most of history, people believed that the brain was fixed, like a machine that could only wear down with time. But modern neuroscience has shattered that myth. The brain is not static, it is plastic. It is constantly rewiring itself in response to what you think, what you feel, and how you interpret your experiences. Every thought you repeat strengthens certain connections, and every choice of meaning you assign to an event shapes the structure of your brain. This means you are not stuck with the brain you were born with. You are shaping the brain you will live with tomorrow, and the way you do it is through the stories you tell yourself about what happens in your life. The most powerful way to take control of this process is through a practice called reframing. Reframing is the art of changing the lens through which you see your circumstances. It does not mean ignoring reality or pretending problems don't exist. It means choosing the perspective that empowers you instead of the one that drains you. Imagine two people facing the same obstacle. One says, "This is the end. I've failed. I'm not good enough." The other says, "This is a lesson. It shows me what doesn't work. It gives me the chance to grow." Same situation, completely different outcomes. The first person shuts down while the second pushes forward. That is the power of reframing. You don't change the facts, but you change the meaning, and in doing so, you change the future. Science backs this up. Carol Dweck's research on mindset has shown that people with a fixed mindset, who believe their abilities are permanent, tend to avoid challenges, give up easily, and view setbacks as proof of their inadequacy. But those with a growth mindset, who believe that abilities can be developed through effort, see challenges as opportunities to learn. When they fail, they don't see it as the end, they see it as part of the process. Brain scans even show that people with a growth mindset have more neural activity in areas linked to learning when they face mistakes. The only difference between the two groups is the story they tell themselves. One sees failure as evidence of limits, the other as evidence of progress. That reframe is the dividing line between stagnation and growth. Consider also the way we experience stress. Stress is often labeled as harmful, as something that wears us down. But research from Harvard University uncovered a surprising truth. When participants were told to reframe their stress response as their body preparing for action, their performance improved. Their hearts still raced, their palms still sweated, but their blood vessels stayed more relaxed, resembling the response of joy and excitement rather than fear. The physical experience of stress did not change, but the interpretation of it changed everything about its impact. Stress became fuel instead of poison. The way you frame your experiences does not just alter your emotions, it alters your biology. This is why language matters so much. The words you use in your inner dialogue shape the reality you live in. If you tell yourself, "I'm not capable of handling this," your brain wires itself toward helplessness. If you say, "This is difficult, but I can learn through it," your brain begins wiring itself for resilience. Repeated enough times, these choices of language form grooves in the brain, automatic pathways that shape how you respond without conscious thought. Over months and years, these small choices accumulate into an entire mindset. And your mindset is not just a way of thinking, it is the filter through which you experience life. The practice of reframing does not require giant leaps. It begins with small, deliberate choices in everyday moments. When you make a mistake, instead of saying, "I failed," say, "I discovered one way that doesn't work." When you feel nervous before an opportunity, instead of saying, "I am weak," say, "My body is preparing me to rise to the challenge." When a door closes, instead of saying, "This is over," say, "This is pointing me in a new direction." The facts of your life remain the same, but the meaning you choose shapes how you feel, how you act, and ultimately, what results you create. Over time, reframing becomes more than a tool you use. Occasionally, it becomes a natural part of who you are. It changes the way you act because your behaviors always flow from the meanings you attach to events. It builds resilience because you no longer interpret setbacks as permanent walls, but as temporary detours. It improves relationships because you stop assuming the worst in people and start looking for opportunities to understand. Most importantly, it changes your future because the brain you build with reframing today is the brain you will carry with you tomorrow. Life will always bring challenges, disappointments, and setbacks. None of us are exempt from struggle, but the difference between those who are crushed by life and those who grow stronger is not luck, not talent, not even resources. It is the decision to choose the frame that empowers rather than the one that weakens. You cannot control every event that happens, but you can always control the meaning you attach to it. That single decision, repeated over and over, rewires your brain and reshapes your destiny. So I invite you to start now. The next time you encounter stress, failure, or rejection, pause and choose your frame. Ask yourself what else this moment could mean, and deliberately select the story that helps you grow. At first, it may feel like a small thing, but it is not small. Each time you reframe, you are carving new pathways in your brain. Each time you reframe, you are training yourself to see opportunity instead of limitation. And one day, you will look back and realize that this one brain hack, this one choice to reframe, did more than get you through challenges. It rewired the way you experience life. It changed your brain, and in doing so, it changed everything about the future that lay ahead of you. There is one idea that has the power to shift the way you think, act, and ultimately live your life, and it is backed by science. Most people move through their days believing that their brain is set, that their patterns of thinking and responding are permanent, that the way they react to stress or failure is just part of who they are. But neuroscience has revealed something extraordinary. The brain is not fixed. It is constantly adapting, rewiring, and reshaping itself based on what we repeatedly do and how we choose to interpret our experiences. Every time you respond to a situation, every time you attach a meaning to what happens, you are training your brain. You are either reinforcing old patterns that hold you back, or you are creating new pathways that allow you to grow. This is not theory. This is the reality of neuroplasticity, and it means you hold in your hands the ability to change your brain and with it the course of your life. The single most effective way to direct this process is something deceptively simple: reframing. Reframing is the skill of choosing how you interpret an event. It doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect or ignoring difficulties. It means looking at the same facts and deliberately choosing the perspective that empowers you. Imagine two people lose their job on the same day. One person says, "This is the end, I'll never recover." The other says, "This is the push I needed to find a new path." The event is the same, but the interpretation changes everything. One story creates despair. The other creates possibility. That is the power of reframing. By shifting meaning, you shift emotion, behavior, and ultimately outcome. Decades of research prove this. Psychologist Carol Dweck's studies on mindset show that people who believe their abilities are fixed struggle more and achieve less than those who believe abilities can grow. The difference is not talent, but perspective. The fixed mindset interprets failure as evidence of limits. The growth mindset interprets failure as part of the learning process. Brain scans even reveal that people with a growth mindset show greater neural activity when they make mistakes, meaning their brains are literally engaging with the challenge instead of shutting down. That small difference in interpretation creates enormous differences in achievement. When you reframe difficulty as growth, you keep your brain open, engaged, and moving forward. Think also about stress, something we are often taught to fear. Stress is labeled as harmful, as something that wears us down. Yet studies from Harvard show that the way we interpret stress changes the way our body reacts to it. When participants were told to see stress not as danger, but as energy preparing them for action, their performance improved. Their hearts still raced, their palms still sweated, but their blood vessels stayed more relaxed, resembling the response to excitement rather than fear. The stress itself did not disappear. What changed was the meaning attached to it. By reframing stress as readiness, people transformed something that normally feels like a burden into a resource. The same physical signals that once triggered panic now became signs of strength. This demonstrates why the words you use matter so deeply. Language is not just a reflection of reality, it is the instruction manual your brain follows. Tell yourself, "I can't handle this," and your brain begins shutting down options. Tell yourself, this is tough, but I'm learning. And your brain begins searching for solutions. Over time, the repeated use of certain words and frames creates grooves in your mind, habits of thinking that become your automatic response. You may not even notice it happening, but every phrase you repeat builds the mindset you will carry tomorrow. If you want a life of resilience and possibility, it starts with the words you allow yourself to believe. Reframing is not about making one grand decision that changes everything overnight. It is about practicing small shifts consistently. The next time you fail, instead of thinking, I'm not good enough, reframe it as, I discovered what doesn't work yet. The next time you feel nervous, instead of saying, I'm falling apart, reframe it as, my body is preparing me for this challenge. The next time someone rejects you, instead of assuming this is the end, reframe it as, this is life pointing me to another path. At first, reframing takes effort because your brain is used to old patterns. But with repetition, new patterns form, and eventually your brain defaults to more empowering frames without you even trying. This practice doesn't just change your mood in the moment. It changes the trajectory of your life. When you consistently reframe setbacks as lessons, you act with persistence instead of quitting early. When you reframe stress as readiness, you perform better under pressure. When you reframe rejection as redirection, you keep moving until you find the opportunity that is truly right for you. Step by step, these new choices accumulate into resilience, confidence, and growth. They reshape your habits, your relationships, and your results. Life will never stop bringing challenges. No one escapes difficulty. But the difference between those who are defeated by life and those who rise above it is not luck or resources. It is the story they tell themselves. The frame you choose determines whether an obstacle becomes a wall or a doorway. You may not control every event that happens to you, but you always control how you see it. And that choice is powerful enough to change your brain and your future. So I encourage you to begin now. In the moments when things feel overwhelming, pause. Listen to the story you are telling yourself. Then ask, what else could this mean? Choose the frame that gives you strength instead of the one that steals it. At first, it will feel like a small act, but small acts repeated shape entire lives. One day, you will look back and realize that this practice of reframing, this single brain hack backed by science, was not just a tool you used occasionally, it was the turning point. It changed the way you responded to challenges. It rewired your brain for growth. And in doing so, it changed the course of your life. There is a discovery about the human brain that is both simple and profound, one that has the power to completely change how you live your life. For generations, people assumed the brain was fixed, that your intelligence, your habits, and even your reactions were permanently hardwired. But science has shown us something far more hopeful. The brain is plastic, which means it is constantly adapting and reshaping itself in response to the experiences you have, and, most importantly, the meanings you attach to those experiences. Every thought you repeat, every story you tell yourself, every interpretation you choose lays down pathways in your brain that become stronger with use. Over time, those pathways become habits of thought and habits of action. The incredible news is that this process is not automatic beyond your control. You can guide it, and the single most effective way to guide it is through a practice known as reframing. Reframing is the act of choosing how you interpret what happens to you. It is not about denial or pretending everything is fine. It is about recognizing that while you cannot always control events, you can always control the story you attach to them. Imagine two people face the exact same situation. They both miss out on a promotion at work. One person tells themselves, "This means I'm not good enough. I'll never advance." The other says, "This shows me what I need to improve. It's an opportunity to sharpen my skills and be ready for the next chance." The same event has occurred, but the interpretations could not be more different. One person sinks into discouragement, the other gains motivation. That is the power of reframing. Changing the meaning changes the emotional response, the behavior that follows, and ultimately the result that comes next. This is not just a motivational idea. It is supported by science. Carol Dweck's groundbreaking work on mindset shows how profoundly perspective matters. People with a fixed mindset, who believe their abilities are carved in stone, tend to avoid challenges, give up when they fail, and see effort as a sign they are lacking. People with a growth mindset, on the other hand, believe abilities can be developed, so they embrace challenges, see effort as the path to mastery, and view failure as information rather than doom. Their brains even respond differently. When people with a growth mindset make mistakes, brain scans show greater activity in regions linked to learning. This means their brains literally engage with the problem instead of shutting down. All of this stems from reframing difficulty, from telling themselves a different story about what failure and struggle really mean. The same principle applies to stress. Most of us are taught to see stress as harmful, as something that damages our health and weakens our performance. But research from Harvard has revealed that the way we interpret stress actually changes how our body reacts to it. When people were told to reframe their stress response, not as a sign of being overwhelmed, but as their body preparing them to perform, their physical response shifted. Their hearts still raced and their palms still sweated, but their blood vessels remained more relaxed, resembling the pattern seen when people experience excitement. Their performance improved because they no longer saw stress as a threat, but as a resource. This shows just how powerful reframing is. It does not only affect your emotions and thoughts, it can influence your biology. This is why the language you use in your own self-talk matters so much. Words are not neutral. They guide your focus and shape your expectations. If you tell yourself, "I can't do this," your brain starts to shut down options and reinforces helplessness. If you tell yourself, "This is tough, but I can figure it out," your brain engages problem-solving circuits. If you repeat, "I've failed, so I must not be capable," you wire yourself for avoidance. If you say, "That didn't work, so now I know what to adjust," you wire yourself for persistence. Over time, these words carve grooves in your mind. Eventually, your responses become automatic, but they began with the small choice of how you framed the situation. Reframing does not require you to overhaul your life in one dramatic moment. It is practiced in the little choices every day. When you forget something important, you can call yourself careless, or you can see it as a reminder to build better systems. When you feel nervous before speaking in public, you can label it weakness, or you can recognize it as energy preparing you to deliver. When you encounter rejection, you can see it as a dead end, or you can see it as redirection towards something better suited to you. The facts of the situation are the same, but the meaning you attach alters your experience and the outcome that follows. The more you practice reframing, the more natural it becomes. At first, you will need to catch yourself, pause, and deliberately choose a new frame. But with repetition, your brain begins to favor these new pathways automatically. Soon, you find yourself bouncing back from setbacks more quickly, approaching challenges with curiosity instead of dread, and seeing possibilities where you used to see only problems. This is not just a mental trick. It is your brain rewiring itself through neuroplasticity, building a mindset that supports growth, resilience, and fulfillment. Life will always present difficulties. No one is spared from obstacles, disappointments, and stressful moments. But what separates those who remain stuck from those who rise stronger is not the size of the challenge, but the frame through which they choose to see it. You may not control the events, but you always control the meaning. That choice, repeated day after day, shapes your brain, your mindset, your behavior, and your future. So I encourage you to begin today. The next time you face a challenge, pause and ask yourself, what else could this mean? How can I reframe this in a way that helps me move forward? Choose words that give you strength instead of words that trap you in fear. Each time you do, you are not only changing your perspective in that moment, you are literally reshaping your brain to respond differently next time. One day, you will look back and realize that this practice of reframing was not just a small habit, it was the turning point. It gave you the power to take control of your story, to change your brain, and to change your life.